A farmer's son gave away his prized cow to a struggling neighbor. The next morning, a billionaire's helicopter lands at sunrise. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The morning dew clung to the tall grass of Oak Ridge Farm, glistening like diamonds under the first rays of sunlight. Thomas Miller wiped the sweat from his brow as he finished the morning milking, his calloused hands moving with practiced precision. At 47, the lines etching his weathered face told a story of drought, failed harvests, and the relentless struggle against bank foreclosures. But through it all, there had been one constant source of hope: Bella, their prized Holstein cow. Thomas patted Bella's speckled flank, admiring the perfect black and white markings that set her apart from the other livestock. "That's a good girl," he murmured, running his hand along her sleek coat. "Best milk producer in 3 counties, aren't you?" Bella had been more than just a cow to the Miller family. When the bank threatened foreclosure 2 years ago, it was Bella's exceptional milk production and the premium it commanded that kept them afloat. Her uncommon lineage and near-perfect genetics had produced offspring that sold for prices high enough to make the mortgage payments when nothing else could. The barn door creaked open, and Thomas's son Nathan entered, his tall frame silhouetted against the morning light. At 23, Nathan had his father's strong jaw and his mother's thoughtful eyes. Unlike many of his childhood friends who had fled to cities in search of easier lives, Nathan had stayed, committed to the land that had been in their family for 4 generations. "Morning, Dad," Nathan said, grabbing a nearby pitchfork. "Mom's got breakfast ready soon." Thomas nodded, his eyes lingering on Bella. "She's given almost 2 gallons more than yesterday. The Richardson dairy might increase their offer after they see these numbers." Nathan stiffened slightly at the mention of selling Bella's milk to the large commercial dairy. It was good money, but the Richardsons were known for treating their animals like machines rather than living creatures. "Did you deliver the hay to the Thompsons yesterday?" Thomas asked, changing the subject. "I did," Nathan replied, his voice suddenly quieter. "Dad, they're not doing well." Thomas sighed, emptying the last of Bella's milk into the steel container. The Thompsons had the neighboring farm, about 2 miles down the dusty road. Once prosperous, their fortunes had changed dramatically after Frank Thompson suffered a stroke last year. With medical bills mounting, and his wife Sarah struggling to maintain the farm alone, their situation had become increasingly desperate. "Frank still bedridden?" Thomas asked, though he knew the answer. Nathan nodded, leaning against a wooden post. "Sarah was trying to hide it, but I could tell they haven't had a proper meal in days. Their last cow died last week, some kind of infection they couldn't afford to treat." Thomas's face darkened. He knew the cruel mathematics of rural poverty all too well. No cow meant no milk meant no income, and no income meant no food. It was a downward spiral that had claimed many family farms over the years. "We'll send over some of our preserves," he said finally. "Your mother made extra blackberry jam last summer." "Dad, they need more than jam," Nathan said, his eyes intense. "Their kids are hungry." Thomas straightened, his expression hardening. "Nathan, we're barely keeping our own heads above water. You know that. The mortgage payment is due next week, and we're still $300 short." The conversation might have ended there, like so many others, with the harsh reality of their financial limitations, silencing even the most charitable intentions. But as Nathan looked at Bella, a thought began forming in his mind. Radical, perhaps even foolish, but impossible to ignore once it had taken root. That evening, as the family sat around their worn oak table, Nathan barely touched his stew. His mother, Ellen, noticed immediately. Nothing escaped Ellen Miller's attention, especially when it concerned her only son. "You've been pushing that stew around for 15 minutes, she said, her voice gentle but probing. "What's on your mind?" Nathan set down his spoon and looked at his parents. "I've been thinking about the Thompsons." Thomas exchanged a glance with his wife. "Son, we've been through this. We'll help where we can, but we should give them Bella," Nathan interrupted, the words tumbling out before he could reconsider. The silence that followed was absolute. Ellen's hand froze midway to her water glass. Thomas stared at his son as if he'd suggested burning down the barn. "Have you lost your mind?" Thomas finally managed, his voice low but trembling with emotion. "Bella is the reason we still have this farm. Her milk is premium quality, her calves fetch top dollar, and you want to just give her away." "The Thompsons have children, Dad," Nathan replied, his voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. "Little Amy is only 6. They haven't had fresh milk in weeks." "And what about us?" Thomas countered, his fist coming down on the table hard enough to make the plates jump. "What about our survival? Your mother's medicine costs a fortune. The bank won't accept good intentions for payment." Ellen reached across the table and placed her hand on her husband's arm. "Thomas," she said softly, "let's listen to what Nathan is saying." Nathan took a deep breath. "Dad, I've run the numbers. The Richardson offer for Bella's milk would cover us for, 3 months? But if we give Bella to the Thompsons, their children get milk, they can sell the excess and maybe, just maybe, they can start rebuilding. And we go under instead," Thomas said bitterly. "Shifting the suffering from one family to another doesn't solve anything." "We still have the other cows," Nathan argued. "They don't produce as much as Bella, but it's something. And I've been talking with Johnson about picking up extra work at his hardware store on weekends." Thomas pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. "This is madness. Bella stays here. End of discussion." He stomped out of the kitchen, the screen door slamming behind him. Ellen sighed, her eyes following her husband's retreat. "Give him time," she told Nathan. "Your father has carried the weight of this farm on his shoulders for so long. The fear of losing it all, it haunts him." Later that night, Nathan sat on the porch steps, watching the moonlight cast long shadows across the fields. The chirping of crickets provided a soundtrack to his troubled thoughts. The screen door creaked, and he turned to see his mother joining him. "You've always had a good heart," Ellen said, easing herself down beside him. "Just like your grandfather. He would have done the same thing you're suggesting." Nathan looked at her, surprised. "You think I'm right about Bella?" Ellen gazed out at the darkened fields. "I think life isn't just about survival, Nathan. It's about how we survive, what we're willing to sacrifice for others. That's what builds a community. Dad doesn't see it that way." "Your father carries scars from the years when no one helped us," Ellen explained. "The bank was ready to take everything, and our neighbors looked the other way. It hardened something in him." They sat in comfortable silence for a while before Ellen spoke again. "Whatever you decide, I trust your judgment." The words hung in the air, both a blessing and a burden. By dawn, Nathan had made his decision. He rose before the sun, quietly slipping out to the barn where Bella was resting. The big Holstein cow looked up at him with those gentle brown eyes that seemed almost human in their expressiveness. "Come on, girl," he whispered, securing a rope around her halter. "Someone needs you more than we do." The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten as Nathan led Bella down the long dirt road toward the Thompson farm. Each step felt heavy with the weight of his choice. Was he betraying his family or honoring their deepest values? The question accompanied him with every footfall on the dusty path. Sarah Thompson was already up, attempting to coax life from their withered vegetable garden, when Nathan appeared at the edge of their property, with Bella in tow. Her confusion quickly gave way to disbelief as Nathan explained his purpose. "We can't accept this," Sarah protested, her voice breaking despite her attempt to stay composed. "Bella is your family's livelihood." "She's a cow," Nathan said simply. Your children are human beings. Some equations aren't that complicated." Tears streamed down Sarah's weathered cheeks as the full meaning of the gift sank in. Fresh milk for her children, income from the excess, a chance to climb out of the pit of poverty that had seemed inescapable just hours before. "Frank needs to see this," she whispered, wiping her eyes. "It will give him something to fight for." Nathan helped secure Bella in the Thompsons' empty barn, showing Sarah the particular way the cow liked to be milked, explaining her diet and habits with the thoroughness of someone handing over a treasured possession. The sun was fully up by the time Nathan began the long walk home, his heart both lighter and heavier. He knew what awaited him there, his father's anger, perhaps even a permanent rift in their relationship. But something else filled his chest too, the certainty that he had done the right thing, no matter the personal cost. As the Miller farm came into view, Nathan stopped in his tracks. His father stood in the yard, shoulders slumped, looking older and more vulnerable than Nathan had ever seen him. For a moment, neither man moved. "Is it done?" Thomas asked finally, his voice carrying across the distance between them. Nathan nodded, bracing himself for the storm. But Thomas merely closed his eyes briefly, then turned and walked back toward the house, without another word. The silence hurt more than any shouting could have. That night, dinner was a quiet affair. Ellen tried to maintain conversation, but the absence at the table was palpable. Not just Bella, but the easy trust that had once existed between father and son. Nathan lay awake long into the night, questioning his decision despite his conviction that it had been the right one. Outside his window, a restless wind picked up, rattling the old farmhouse with increasing intensity as midnight came and went. Just before dawn, a new sound cut through the pre-dawn stillness, the distant rhythmic thump of helicopter blades slicing through the air. Nathan sat up, instantly alert. Helicopters were rare enough in these parts to be noteworthy, and one arriving at this hour was unprecedented. The sound grew louder, more insistent, until it seemed to hover directly over the Miller farm. Nathan rushed to the window, squinting against the first weak light of dawn breaking over the eastern horizon. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Descending toward their fields was a sleek black helicopter, its polished surface catching the golden rays of the rising sun. Nathan scrambled into his clothes and raced downstairs, nearly colliding with his father in the narrow hallway. Thomas was already dressed, his expression a mixture of alarm and confusion. "What in God's name?" Thomas began, but Nathan was already pushing past him toward the front door. Ellen appeared from the bedroom, hastily tying her robe. "Thomas? Nathan? What's happening?" "Stay inside, Ellen," Thomas commanded, following his son onto the porch. The helicopter had landed in the eastern pasture, its blades still spinning, whipping the tall grass into frenzied waves. As they watched, the side door slid open, and a man stepped out, tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that seemed absurdly out of place against the backdrop of their modest farm. "Who is that?" Nathan asked, shielding his eyes against the rising sun. Thomas shook his head wordlessly, his posture tense. Farm foreclosures had become increasingly common in the area, each one executed with cold efficiency by bank representatives. But they didn't typically arrive by helicopter at dawn. The stranger approached them with confident strides, followed by two more individuals carrying what appeared to be camera equipment. As he drew closer, Nathan was struck by his age. Younger than expected, perhaps in his mid-30s, with sharp features and the self-assured bearing of someone accustomed to power. "Mr. Miller," the man called over the diminishing roar of the helicopter blades. "Thomas Miller?" Thomas stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Nathan. "I'm Thomas Miller. This is my property you've landed on, uninvited." The stranger smiled, seemingly unperturbed by the frosty reception. "Alexander Wright," he said, extending his hand. When Thomas made no move to take it, Wright let his hand fall casually back to his side. CEO of Wright Enterprises. I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but I wanted to catch you before you started your day." "You could have called," Thomas said flatly. Wright laughed, the sound surprisingly genuine. "Fair point, Mr. Miller, but this matter felt too important for a phone call." By now, Ellen had joined them on the porch, her curious gaze taking in the scene. The helicopter, the cameras, the expensively dressed stranger standing in their front yard as casually as if he'd been invited for Sunday dinner. "What matter would that be exactly?" Thomas asked, his voice still wary. Alexander Wright's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "I'd like to discuss Nathan's act of extraordinary generosity yesterday." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Nathan felt his stomach drop. How could this man possibly know about Bella? The gift had been made in the early morning hours, with no witnesses except Sarah Thompson. "I don't know what you're talking about," Thomas said, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. Wright turned his attention to Nathan. "You gave your family's prized Holstein cow to the Thompson family yesterday morning, didn't you? A cow that represents a significant portion of your own livelihood." Nathan swallowed hard. "How do you know that?" "Sarah Thompson's daughter, Amy, has a rather remarkable social media presence for a 6-year-old, Wright explained. Or rather, Sarah does, managing it on her behalf. She posted about your gift yesterday. Quite eloquently, I might add. The post went viral overnight." One of Wright's associates stepped forward, holding up a tablet. On the screen was a simple photo, little Amy Thompson hugging Bella's neck, her small face radiating pure joy. The accompanying text told the story of Nathan's sacrifice in Sarah's heartfelt words. 2 million views and counting, Wright said quietly. In a world starved for good news, this resonated rather powerfully. Nathan felt a strange sense of unreality washing over him. 2 million people had seen his private act of charity, had formed opinions about it, shared it, commented on it. "What does any of this have to do with you?" Thomas demanded, though his tone had lost some of its edge. Wright gestured toward the farmhouse. "Perhaps we could discuss this over coffee. I promise to explain everything." 10 minutes later, they were seated around the Miller's kitchen table, the incongruity of Alexander Wright's bespoke suit against the backdrop of their worn linoleum and faded curtains not lost on any of them. Ellen had hurriedly made coffee, serving it in their mismatched mugs with an apologetic smile. "Mr. Miller," Wright began, addressing Thomas directly, "I grew up on a farm not unlike this one in Nebraska. My father lost everything in the farm crisis of the 80s. We had to start over with nothing." Thomas's expression remained impassive, but Nathan noticed a slight shift in his posture, the barest acknowledgement of a shared experience. "I got lucky," Wright continued. "Tech boom, good investments, right place at the right time. Built Wright Enterprises from the ground up. We're primarily in agricultural technology now, developing systems to make family farms sustainable in the modern economy." "And what does this have to do with my son giving away our cow?" Thomas asked bluntly. Wright set down his coffee mug. "I've made it my mission to spotlight and support acts of rural community support. What Nathan did exemplifies the very best of that tradition, sacrificing his own security to help a neighbor in need." Nathan felt a flush creeping up his neck. "It wasn't meant to be public," he muttered. "The best acts of kindness rarely are," Wright agreed, "but they can inspire others when shared." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I'd like to feature your story in our company's new campaign on sustainable community farming. And more importantly, I'd like to help both your family and the Thompsons." Ellen spoke for the first time since they'd sat down. "Help how exactly?" "For starters, replacing Bella with 2 purebred Holsteins from the best genetic lines in the country," Wright said. "One for your farm, one for the Thompsons. Additionally, I'd like to offer both families access to our new agricultural technology program, irrigation systems, soil analysis, equipment, at no cost. The kitchen fell silent as the Millers processed this unexpected proposal. Nathan glanced at his father, trying to read his reaction. Thomas's face remained carefully neutral, but Nathan could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, weighing suspicion against opportunity, pride against practicality. "What's the catch?" Thomas finally asked. Wright smiled slightly. "The catch, as you put it, is that we'd like to document the process. Nothing intrusive, just following the impact of the technology, and of course, Nathan's initial act of generosity. It tells the story we want to tell about rural communities supporting each other." "You want to use us as what? Advertising?" Thomas's voice had taken on a hard edge again. "I'd call it educational content," Wright countered smoothly. "But yes, there would be media coverage, interviews, documentation of the technology implementation. We'd compensate you for your time, of course." Nathan watched his father's jaw tighten, recognizing the familiar pride that had sustained Thomas through years of hardship, but had also sometimes prevented him from accepting help when it was needed. "Dad," Nathan said quietly, "maybe we should consider it." Thomas shot him a sharp look. "You've made enough unilateral decisions for this family lately, don't you think?" The words stung, but Nathan held his ground. "This could help the Thompsons too. Isn't that what matters?" Ellen reached across the table and placed her hand on her husband's arm. "Thomas, at least hear the full offer before deciding." Alexander Wright, sensing the tension, stood up. "I understand this is a lot to take in. Why don't I give you some time to discuss it as a family? My team and I will wait by the helicopter." After Wright and his associates had excused themselves, an uncomfortable silence descended on the kitchen. Nathan stared down at his hands, unable to meet his father's gaze. "You had no right," Thomas finally said, his voice low and controlled. "No right to give away Bella without discussing it with me first." "I know," Nathan admitted, "but I couldn't stand by and watch the Thompsons' children go hungry when we had something that could help them. And now your impulsive decision has brought cameras and corporate interests to our doorstep," Thomas continued, anger simmering beneath his words. "Our private lives splashed across the internet without our consent." Ellen sighed. "What's done is done, Thomas. The question is what we do now." "We send them packing," Thomas said firmly. "We don't need their charity or their cameras." Nathan looked up, meeting his father's eyes directly. "Dad, I know you're angry with me, and you have every right to be. But this isn't about me anymore. It's about an opportunity that could help not just us, but the Thompsons too. Can you set aside your pride long enough to consider that?" Thomas's expression darkened. "Pride? You think this is about pride? It's about independence, self-reliance, the values this family was built on." "And what about community?" Nathan countered. "Wasn't this family also built on helping neighbors in need?" Ellen moved to the window, gazing out at the helicopter sitting in their field like an alien spacecraft. "Thomas," she said softly, "remember when your father lost his first crop to the drought of '73? It was the Hendersons who brought over seed for replanting. No conditions, no cameras, just neighbors helping neighbors." Thomas fell silent, the memory clearly striking a chord. "Times have changed," Ellen continued. "Maybe help looks different now, but we need it, Thomas. You know we do." Nathan watched his father's internal struggle play out across his weathered face, the need warring with decades of fierce independence. Finally, Thomas pushed back his chair and stood. "I'll talk to Wright again," he said gruffly, "but I'm not promising anything." As Thomas stepped outside to where Alexander Wright waited by the helicopter, Nathan caught his mother's eye. There was worry there, but also a glimmer of hope. "This could change everything," Nathan said quietly. Ellen nodded. That's what I'm afraid of. From the kitchen window, Nathan watched his father and Alexander Wright engage in what appeared to be an intense conversation. Thomas stood with his arms crossed, shoulders rigid, while Wright spoke animatedly, occasionally gesturing toward the farmhouse. After what seemed like an eternity, the two men shook hands, a brief business-like gesture that revealed little about the outcome of their discussion. When Thomas returned to the kitchen, his expression was unreadable. He poured himself another cup of coffee before finally breaking the silence. He's offering $50,000, Thomas said flatly, plus the 2 Holsteins and all the technology he mentioned before. Ellen gasped softly. 50,000? For exclusive rights to tell our story, yours specifically, Thomas continued, looking directly at Nathan, and for consulting on their rural support initiative. Nathan struggled to process the figure. $50,000 would clear their outstanding mortgage payments, repair the tractor, fix the roof, and still leave enough to build a financial cushion they'd never had before. What did you tell him? Nathan asked cautiously. Thomas took a long sip of his coffee. I told him we'd need to discuss the details as a family and with the Thompsons. He's giving us 24 hours to decide. He set his mug down with deliberate care. He's flying to the Thompson farm now to make them the same offer. You didn't say no outright, Ellen observed, a note of surprise in her voice. Times are changing, Thomas said, echoing Ellen's earlier words with a touch of resignation. Maybe we need to change with them. Before Nathan could respond, the distant sound of vehicles approaching drew their attention. Through the window, they could see 3 news vans making their way up the dirt road to their farm, dust clouds billowing behind them. Great, Thomas muttered. The circus has arrived. Within the hour, the Millers' quiet farmhouse had become the center of a media storm. Reporters set up cameras on the front lawn, neighbors drove by slowly to gawk at the commotion, and the family's phone rang incessantly with interview requests from stations as far away as Chicago and New York. This is insane, Nathan said, peeking through the curtains at the growing crowd. How did they all find out so quickly? Social media, Ellen replied, silencing the ringing phone for the dozenth time. Sarah's post must have gotten picked up by local news, and then it spread. Thomas paced the kitchen, his earlier calm giving way to agitation. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Our private business turned into a spectacle. The sudden sharp knock on their back door startled all 3 of them. Ellen cautiously opened it to find Sarah Thompson standing there, looking as overwhelmed as they felt. I came through the fields to avoid the reporters, she explained, stepping inside. They're at our place, too. I'm so sorry about all this. I never thought a simple thank you post would cause such a commotion. Ellen embraced her warmly. It's not your fault, Sarah. No one could have predicted this. Sarah turned to Nathan, her eyes filled with emotion. A man named Alexander Wright just left our farm. He told us what you did, giving up Bella when she meant so much to your family. Her voice broke slightly. Frank cried when I told him. It's the first real emotion he's shown since his stroke. Nathan felt a flush of embarrassment. How are the kids doing with Bella? A smile broke through Sarah's worried expression. Amy hasn't left that cow's side since she arrived, and this morning, all 3 children had real milk with their breakfast for the first time in weeks. She took Nathan's hand and squeezed it tightly. You'll never know what that simple thing means to a mother. Thomas, who had been listening silently, cleared his throat. Sarah, this Wright fellow made you an offer too? She nodded. It's incredible. Almost too good to believe. A new cow, farming technology we could never afford, money to pay Frank's medical bills. She trailed off, shaking her head in wonderment. He said it all hinges on both families agreeing to participate. What do you think about it? Nathan asked. All the publicity, I mean. Sarah considered the question carefully. Honestly, the attention makes me uncomfortable. We're private people just like you. But Frank and I talked it over, and we see it as an answered prayer. We were at the end of our rope, Nathan. This could save our farm, pay for Frank's rehabilitation therapy. She looked at each of the Millers in turn. Whatever you decide, we'll respect it. You've done more than enough for us already. Ellen glanced at Thomas, a silent communication passing between them. Why don't we all sit down, she suggested. This affects both our families. We should make the decision together. For the next hour, the two families discussed the proposal from every angle. The opportunities it presented were undeniable, but so were the potential complications, privacy concerns, contractual obligations, the pressure of public scrutiny. Thomas remained the most hesitant, raising pointed questions about what exactly would be required of them and for how long. I'm not comfortable becoming some corporate poster boy, he insisted, or having cameras follow us around for months on end. Mr. Wright said the main filming would only take 2 weeks, Sarah pointed out, and we'd have approval over the final content. Nathan had remained relatively quiet during the discussion, aware that he had already made one major decision, without family consultation. But as the conversation circled back to the same concerns for the third time, he felt compelled to speak up. Dad, he said, I understand your reservations, but this opportunity isn't just about the money or the new cow. It's about security, for our farm and for the Thompsons. It's about making sure what happened with Bella isn't just a temporary solution but a permanent one. Thomas studied his son, his expression softening slightly. You really believe in this, don't you? Nathan nodded. I do. And yes, I wish it hadn't become this public spectacle, but since it has, maybe we can use it to do some real good. The sound of more vehicles arriving interrupted their discussion. Ellen peered out the window and let out a small gasp. There must be 50 people out there now. Some of them look like regular folks, not reporters. Curious, Nathan joined his mother at the window. Indeed, the crowd had grown substantially, but it wasn't just media anymore. Neighbors, townspeople, and even strangers with homemade signs had gathered in their front yard. What on earth? Thomas muttered, moving to the door despite Ellen's attempt to stop him. When Thomas stepped onto the porch, a hush fell over the crowd. Then, to everyone's surprise, they began to applaud, a spontaneous outpouring of support that seemed to catch even the reporters off guard. Ed Johnson, owner of the hardware store in town, and a notoriously taciturn man, stepped forward from the crowd. Thomas, Ellen, Nathan, we just wanted you to know that what you did for the Thompsons represents the best of our community. In these hard times, it's reminded us all of what's truly important. Thomas stood frozen, clearly unprepared for this display. Nathan moved to stand beside his father, equally stunned by the response. Ed continued, his voice carrying over the assembled crowd. We've taken up a collection at the town hall. It's not much, but we wanted to help replace Bella. Community supporting community, like it used to be. As if on cue, Margaret Wilson, who ran the local diner, stepped forward with an envelope. There's almost $8,000 here, she said, holding it out to Thomas. From all of us. Thomas stared at the envelope, his weathered hand trembling slightly as he reached for it. For a moment, Nathan thought his father might refuse it, might retreat behind the wall of pride that had defined him for so long. Instead, Thomas cleared his throat, visibly struggling with his emotions. We can't accept this. A murmur of disappointment rippled through the crowd. Not because we don't appreciate it, Thomas clarified quickly, but because it appears we may have another solution in the works, one that could help not just us, but the Thompsons too, and maybe eventually other farms in the area. He turned to look at Nathan, a question in his eyes. Nathan nodded almost imperceptibly, understanding passing between them. Thomas faced the crowd again. What my son did yesterday, it wasn't something I would have done. I've always believed in handling our problems ourselves, not burdening others with them. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. But Nathan reminded me of something important, that we're not just individual farms struggling alone. We're a community, and sometimes helping each other isn't a burden, it's a privilege. The crowd broke into applause again, louder this time. Nathan felt a wave of emotion sweep over him as he watched his father, proud, stubborn Thomas Miller, publicly acknowledge the value of what he had done. As the impromptu gathering continued, with neighbors sharing stories of past hardships overcome through community support, Nathan noticed Alexander Wright's helicopter returning, circling once before landing again in the eastern pasture. The decision, it seemed, was about to become reality. For better or worse, the quiet life the Millers had known was transforming before their eyes, all because of a single act of generosity and a prized Holstein cow named Bella. The week following what the local newspaper had dubbed the Bella incident passed in a whirlwind of activity. After careful consideration and lengthy discussions with Alexander Wright's legal team, both the Millers and the Thompsons had signed contracts agreeing to participate in Wright Enterprises' Heartland Initiative. The media circus gradually dispersed as newer stories drew their attention elsewhere, though a dedicated production crew remained, documenting the changes unfolding on both farms. Thomas, despite his initial reservations, had thrown himself into the project with surprising enthusiasm. Nathan often found his father poring over the technical specifications for the new irrigation systems, or discussing soil chemistry with the agricultural experts Wright had dispatched to analyze their land. "Have you ever seen him like this?" Nathan asked his mother one evening, as they watched Thomas engaged in an animated conversation with a soil scientist on their front porch. Ellen smiled, a hint of wonder in her expression. "Not since we first bought this place, back when everything felt possible." She handed Nathan a glass of lemonade. "Your father's always loved farming, the science of it, the challenge. But years of just trying to survive drove some of that joy out of him." Nathan nodded, understanding. He'd been too young to remember the early days of excitement and possibility his mother described. His memories were primarily of constant worry, of his father's stoic determination in the face of one setback after another. "He's still mad at me about Bella, isn't he?" Nathan asked quietly. Ellen considered this. "Not mad, exactly. Your father doesn't handle change well, especially when it's forced upon him. But I think he's starting to see that sometimes the most uncomfortable changes lead to the greatest growth." She patted his arm reassuringly. "Give him time." The following morning, a convoy of trucks arrived, bearing the promised Holsteins, magnificent animals that made even Bella seem ordinary by comparison. The lead livestock specialist, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Patel, supervised their delivery with clinical efficiency. "These cows represent the pinnacle of dairy genetics," she explained as the animals were led into the barn. "Selectively bred for milk production, disease resistance, and longevity. The female you're receiving, Duchess, is expected to produce nearly twice the volume of milk as your previous Holstein." Thomas circled the cow with an appraising eye. "She's a beauty, no doubt about that." Dr. Patel nodded briskly. "Mr. Wright was quite specific, only the best for both farms. The Thompson family is receiving Duke, Duchess's brother, as we speak. Similar genetic profile, though with traits more optimized for breeding purposes than milk production." As if on cue, Nathan's phone chimed with a text message from Sarah Thompson. "Duke has arrived. Frank actually got out of bed to see him. Thank you again for everything." Nathan smiled, showing the message to his father. Thomas read it, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Well," he said gruffly, "at least some good has come from all this upheaval." The next phase of the Heartland Initiative began that afternoon with the arrival of the film crew's director, a wiry, energetic woman named Vanessa Chen. Unlike the impeccably dressed Alexander Wright, Vanessa wore practical clothes, jeans, boots, and a well-worn flannel shirt that suggested familiarity with farm environments. "I grew up on a rice farm in California," she explained over coffee at the miller's kitchen table. "So I understand the rhythms of agricultural life and the privacy concerns you might have." Thomas seemed relieved by this revelation. "What exactly are you planning to film?" Vanessa pulled out a tablet and brought up a storyboard. "We're focusing on 3 main narrative threads: Nathan's initial act of generosity, the implementation of the new farming technologies, and the community aspect, how this project might serve as a model for revitalizing struggling rural areas." She looked directly at Nathan. "Your decision to give away Bella is the emotional core of the story. We'd like to recreate that morning walk to the Thompson farm, if possible." Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "Recreate it? You mean pretend to do it again for the cameras?" Vanessa nodded. "Just a few shots of you walking a cow, not Bella, obviously, since she's with the Thompsons now, down the same road. We'd intercut it with your narration about what was going through your mind at the time." Thomas frowned. "Sounds like you're asking him to perform, not document reality." "Documentary filmmaking always involves some degree of narrative construction," Vanessa replied evenly. "But we're not asking anyone to say or do anything that isn't authentic to their experience." Ellen, who had been listening quietly, leaned forward. "Will you be filming inside our home? That's where I draw the line. Some things should remain private." Vanessa nodded in understanding. "We'll primarily focus on the farm operations, the technology implementation, and pre-arranged interviews. Your home is your sanctuary. We respect that boundary." The conversation continued, ironing out details and boundaries, until they reached an agreement that seemed to satisfy everyone. As Vanessa was leaving, she paused at the door, turning back to Nathan. "By the way," she said, "Alexander Wright wanted me to tell you that there's been an overwhelming response to your story online. People are calling it the Bella effect, spontaneous acts of community support springing up around the country. Someone in Idaho gave their best breeding bull to a neighbor who lost their livestock in a fire. A farming cooperative in Georgia pooled resources to save a family farm from foreclosure." Nathan felt a strange mixture of embarrassment and pride. "I'm glad something good is coming from all this attention." Vanessa smiled. "That's part of what we're documenting, how a single act of generosity can create ripples far beyond its origin. It's powerful stuff." After she left, the family sat in contemplative silence. Finally, Thomas cleared his throat. "I suppose we're really doing this, aren't we?" "Having second thoughts?" Ellen asked gently. Thomas shook his head slowly. "Not exactly. Just trying to get my bearings in this new reality. Everything's changing so fast." Nathan understood his father's discomfort. The Miller farm had operated in essentially the same way for generations. Now, almost overnight, it was being transformed with advanced technology, valuable livestock, and the constant presence of outsiders documenting every aspect of that transformation. "Dad," Nathan said hesitantly, "I know this isn't what you would have chosen. If you want to back out—" "No," Thomas interrupted, his voice firm. "We've made our commitment, and truthfully, this farm needed changing." He stood up, looking out the window at the technicians setting up the new irrigation system in their fields. "I just never imagined it would happen quite like this." The next morning brought another surprise. Alexander Wright himself returned, this time bringing not only his corporate team, but a group of agricultural students from the state university. As they gathered in the newly renovated barn, Wright explained his expanded vision. "The Heartland Initiative isn't just about helping 2 deserving families," he told the assembled group. "It's about creating a sustainable model for rural revitalization, combining traditional farming wisdom with cutting-edge technology." He gestured toward the students. "These young people will be rotating through both farms over the next several months, learning from Thomas and Frank's years of experience while helping implement the new systems. It's an educational exchange that benefits everyone, Nathan watched his father's reaction carefully, expecting resistance to this additional intrusion. To his surprise, Thomas seemed genuinely engaged, already deep in conversation with a student about crop rotation strategies. Later, as Wright prepared to leave, he pulled Nathan aside. "There's something else I wanted to discuss with you privately." Nathan followed him to a quiet corner of the yard, curious and slightly apprehensive. "Your act of giving Bella to the Thompsons revealed something important about your character," Wright said. "A kind of integrity and vision that's rare, especially in someone so young." Nathan shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what seemed right." "Exactly," Wright said, his eyes intent. "And that's precisely the quality I'm looking for. I'd like to offer you a position with Wright Enterprises, heading up our new rural outreach division." Nathan stared at him, speechless. "But I'm not qualified. I don't have a college degree or any business experience. You have something more valuable: authentic understanding of rural communities and their challenges, combined with the moral compass to make difficult decisions for the greater good." Wright handed him a sleek business card. "Think about it. The position would start after we complete the initial phase of the Heartland Initiative. Full benefits, competitive salary, and the opportunity to help shape programs that could transform struggling farming communities across the country." As Wright walked away, Nathan stood rooted to the spot, the business card heavy in his hand. The offer was tempting, more than tempting. It represented opportunities he'd never dreamed possible, a chance to make a difference on a scale far beyond giving away a single cow. But it also meant leaving the farm, leaving his parents, abandoning the life and responsibilities he'd always assumed would be his future. The weight of this new choice settled on his shoulders, both exhilarating and terrifying in its implications. From across the yard, Nathan caught his father watching him, a question in his eyes. Thomas had surely noticed the private conversation with Wright, though he couldn't have heard its content. For the first time since the whole Bella situation began, Nathan found himself reluctant to share everything with his family. Some decisions, it seemed, were even harder than giving away their prized cow. That night, Nathan lay awake in his childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling where glow-in-the-dark stars he'd placed as a 10-year-old still faintly illuminated the darkness. Wright's business card sat on his nightstand, its embossed lettering catching what little moonlight filtered through the curtains. The job offer replayed in his mind, along with all its implications. A position with Wright Enterprises meant leaving the farm, the only home he'd ever known. It meant abandoning his parents to manage the new technologies and expanded operations alone. Yet it also represented an unprecedented opportunity to help other farming families facing the same struggles his family had endured for years. The next morning, bleary-eyed from lack of sleep, Nathan found his father already at work in the new milking facility. The gleaming stainless steel equipment stood in stark contrast to the weathered wooden structure housing it. Thomas moved with purpose, learning the automated systems with a determination that belied his earlier resistance to change. "You're up early," Nathan observed, grabbing an apron from the hook by the door. Thomas nodded, not looking up from the control panel he was adjusting. "Duchess is producing even better than they predicted. Almost 3 gallons more than Bella's best day." There was grudging admiration in his voice. Nathan moved to help with the morning routine, the familiar rhythm of farm work, temporarily pushing aside thoughts of Wright's offer. They worked in companionable silence for nearly an hour before Thomas finally spoke. "Wright offered you something yesterday, didn't he?" His tone was casual, but Nathan could sense the tension beneath it. Nathan hesitated, then nodded. "How did you know?" "I've been a father for 23 years, Thomas replied, the hint of a smile softening his weather-lined face. "I know when my son is carrying a weight on his shoulders." After a moment's pause, Nathan explained the job offer, watching his father's expression carefully. To his surprise, Thomas showed no immediate reaction, no disappointment, no anger, just thoughtful consideration. "It's a good opportunity," Thomas said finally, setting down the equipment he'd been cleaning. "You should consider it seriously." Nathan blinked, taken aback by his father's response. "But what about the farm? All these new systems, the expanded operation. You and Mom can't manage it alone." Thomas gestured around the renovated barn. "These systems are designed to reduce the workload, not increase it. And Wright's program includes ongoing support." He looked directly at Nathan. "This farm has been both a blessing and a burden to this family. I never wanted it to become a prison for you." "It's not a prison," Nathan protested. "It's our home, our legacy." "A legacy is something freely chosen, not an obligation," Thomas replied, his voice gentle. "Your grandfather gave me the choice to leave or stay. I'm giving you the same." Before Nathan could respond, the barn door opened, and Vanessa Chen entered with her camera crew. "Good morning," she called cheerfully. "Ready for the first official day of filming?" For the next week, the documentary team shadowed the Millers, capturing the implementation of the new farming technologies and conducting interviews about Nathan's decision to give away Bella. The recreated scene of Nathan leading a cow down the road to the Thompson farm felt awkward and staged. But Vanessa assured him that the final edit would convey the genuine emotion behind the original act. "The viewers will understand the difference between documentary recreation and reality," she explained, during a break in filming. "What matters is the truth of the story, not the literal authenticity of every frame." Nathan wasn't entirely convinced, but he followed her direction, trying to recall his exact thoughts and feelings from that fateful morning walk. What had seemed like a simple, if difficult, decision at the time had grown increasingly complex in its implications, spiraling outward to affect not just two families, but potentially farming communities across the country. On Thursday afternoon, the Thompsons joined the Millers for a joint interview session. Frank Thompson, still using a wheelchair but notably more energetic than before, spoke eloquently about how Nathan's gift had affected their family. "It wasn't just the milk, though that was a godsend with 3 growing children," Frank explained, his speech slightly slurred from the stroke, but his eyes clear and focused. "It was the reminder that we weren't alone. In today's world, it's easy to forget that we're still a community, that we still look after each other." Sarah nodded agreement, adding, "When I posted about Nathan's gift online, I just wanted to express our gratitude. I never imagined it would resonate with so many people. But I think it speaks to a hunger we all have for stories of genuine human connection." Even little Amy Thompson participated, shyly describing her daily routine caring for Bella. "She likes when I sing to her," the 6-year-old confided, earning charmed smiles from the film crew. During a lunch break, while the others chatted inside, Nathan wandered out to the fields where the new irrigation system was being installed. The precision technology would conserve water while maximizing crop yields, a stark contrast to the inefficient methods they'd relied on for generations. Progress, undoubtedly, but Nathan felt a strange melancholy watching the workers replace the old, familiar equipment. "It's something, isn't it?" Nathan turned to find Sarah Thompson standing beside him, her gaze following his to the workers in the field. "It's incredible technology," Nathan agreed. "Should increase yields by at least 30%. Sarah studied him for a moment. "But you're not entirely happy about it." Nathan sighed. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone experiencing the same thing," she replied with a small smile. "It's strange having your private struggles suddenly turned into this story for public consumption. Don't get me wrong, I'm beyond grateful. But sometimes I feel like we've traded our privacy for security." "Exactly," Nathan said, relieved that someone understood. "And now Wright has offered me a job that would mean leaving the farm altogether. I don't know what to do." Sarah's eyebrows rose. That's quite an opportunity. What does your father think? Surprisingly, he's encouraging me to consider it. Nathan shook his head in bewilderment. After fighting me about giving away Bella, I expected him to be furious about the possibility of me leaving too. People can surprise you, Sarah said thoughtfully. Frank was always the most private person I knew, hated having his picture taken, avoided social gatherings. Now he's agreeing to be filmed for a documentary. She shrugged. Sometimes crisis breaks down our usual defenses, shows us parts of ourselves we didn't know existed. Nathan considered this. His father had certainly changed in unexpected ways since the Bella incident began, becoming more open to new ideas, more willing to accept help from others. Perhaps the rigid, proud man who had initially rejected Nathan's act of charity was evolving into someone more complex, someone capable of seeing beyond the boundaries of their small farm. That evening, a small pre-production screening was held in the miller's barn, converted temporarily into a makeshift theater. The entire crew, both families and Alexander Wright himself, gathered to watch the rough cut of the first segment, focused primarily on Nathan's decision to give Bella away and the immediate aftermath. Nathan shifted uncomfortably as his own face appeared on the large screen, larger than life and more earnest than he remembered being. The narrative skillfully wove together his recreated walk with interview footage, Sarah's social media post, and the initial reaction from the community. Though clearly still a work in progress, the segment powerfully captured the emotional core of what had happened. When the lights came up, Nathan found himself unable to meet anyone's eyes, feeling strangely exposed by the portrayal. But then he felt his father's hand on his shoulder, a firm, reassuring grip. "They got it right," Thomas said quietly. "That's exactly the son I raised." Something in his father's tone made Nathan look up. There was pride there, unmistakable and unrestrained, in a way he had rarely seen before. Not grudging acceptance or reluctant admission, but genuine, unabashed pride in his son's choice. In that moment, surrounded by cameras and strangers and all the trappings of their new public existence, Nathan felt a private understanding pass between him and his father, an acknowledgement that whatever paths they chose, whatever came next, the bond between them remained unbroken. Alexander Wright approached, champagne flutes in hand. "Just a small celebration of our progress so far," he said, distributing the glasses. "To the Heartland Initiative, to both these remarkable families, and to the ripple effects of kindness that continue to spread." As they raised their glasses, Nathan caught Sarah Thompson's eye across the room. She gave him a small, understanding smile, a silent recognition of their shared journey from private citizens to reluctant symbols of rural community values. The weight of Wright's business card seemed to lighten slightly in Nathan's pocket. The decision still loomed, but somehow it felt less like choosing between two irreconcilable futures and more like finding a way to honor both his roots and his emerging vision for a different kind of contribution to rural life. Either way, Nathan realized, his impromptu decision to lead Bella down that dirt road at dawn had already altered the course of his life irrevocably. All that remained was to determine what shape that new course would take. 2 weeks into filming, the routine of having cameras capture their daily lives had become almost normal for the Millers. The production crew, initially perceived as intrusive outsiders, had gradually been accepted as temporary fixtures on the farm, like the seasonal workers who came through during harvest time. Even Thomas had developed a friendly rapport with the sound technician, a former farm boy from Nebraska who shared his interest in vintage tractors. The new technologies were already showing promising results. The smart irrigation system had reduced their water consumption by nearly 40% while improving crop health. Duchess, the replacement Holstein, was producing milk of such exceptional quality that the Richardson Dairy was offering premium rates for exclusive purchasing rights. Nathan had settled into a strange new rhythm, dividing his time between regular farm work, on-camera interviews, and private conversations with Alexander Wright about the position at Wright Enterprises. The more he learned about the role, the more intriguing it became. A chance to help shape agricultural policy and support systems on a national scale. "We're looking at developing microloan programs for small family farms," Wright explained during one such discussion as they walked the perimeter of the Miller property. "Combined with technological support and collective marketing initiatives to help farmers get fair prices for their products." "That could make a real difference," Nathan acknowledged, thinking of how many of their neighbors had been forced to sell to corporate farms over the years. "But what makes you think I could contribute meaningfully to something like that? I'm just one farmer who gave away a cow." Wright stopped, turning to face Nathan directly. "That's precisely why you're the right person. You understand the values that hold rural communities together, but you're also willing to take risks for the greater good. That combination is rare and exactly what this initiative needs." The offer weighed constantly on Nathan's mind, becoming more tempting with each conversation. Yet something held him back from accepting, not just loyalty to his family's farm, but a nagging concern about the authenticity of what was unfolding around them. This concern crystallized one afternoon when Vanessa asked him to reshoot a conversation with his father about the farm's future. The original discussion had been genuine but technically flawed. Background noise from a tractor had rendered portions inaudible. "Just hit the same basic points as before," Vanessa instructed. "Your hopes for the farm, your father's perspective on the changes. Keep it natural." Nathan had tried, but the resulting conversation felt stilted and artificial. Thomas, sensing his son's discomfort, finally held up a hand to stop the filming. "This isn't working," he said firmly. "You can't manufacture authenticity. Either use what you captured the first time, background noise and all, or leave it out entirely." Vanessa looked surprised, but nodded respectfully. "You're right. We'll work with the original footage." After the crew departed, Thomas found Nathan sitting alone on the porch steps, gazing out at the fields where the last light of day painted the crops in golden hues. "Something's troubling you," Thomas observed, lowering himself to sit beside his son. "And I don't think it's just about that reshoot." Nathan hesitated, then voiced the concern that had been growing within him. "Sometimes I wonder if we're participating in something real, or just creating an elaborate story that people want to hear. The Bella effect, the heartwarming tale of rural community values. It feels like we're becoming characters rather than people." Thomas considered this thoughtfully. "There's some truth to that. They're crafting a narrative and we're part of it." He paused, watching a hawk circle lazily above their fields. "But that doesn't make what happened with Bella any less real. It doesn't make the help the Thompsons received, or the technologies improving our farm, or the way this whole situation has made me reconsider my own stubborn pride any less meaningful. But all the publicity, the documentary, Wright's initiative, it's turning a private act of kindness into a commodity." "Maybe," Thomas acknowledged. "Or maybe it's amplifying the impact of that kindness in ways we couldn't have achieved on our own." He placed a hand on Nathan's shoulder. "The world's complicated, son. Good and authentic things can happen even within commercial frameworks. The trick is maintaining your own integrity, regardless of the surrounding context." Nathan mulled over his father's words, finding unexpected wisdom in them. Thomas Miller had never been one for philosophical discussions, yet here he was, offering nuanced perspective on the intersection of authenticity, media, and social impact. The next day brought a surprise visit from several farmers who had traveled from as far as 3 states away to see the Heartland Initiative in action. Alexander Wright, ever aware of marketing opportunities, had arranged for them to tour both the Miller and Thompson farms, observing the new technologies and hearing firsthand about the changes taking place. "We've been following your story online," explained a weather-beaten farmer from Missouri, as they inspected the new milking facility. "When we heard about this technology program, we had to see it for ourselves." "Is it really increasing efficiency as much as they claim?" asked another, eyeing the equipment with a mix of skepticism and hope. Thomas, to Nathan's surprise, launched into an enthusiastic explanation of the systems, complete with detailed statistics on improved yields and reduced resource consumption. Gone was the resistant, tradition-bound farmer of just weeks ago, replaced by an eager advocate for innovative agricultural practices. The initial investment would be impossible for most of us, Thomas acknowledged, but Wright's talking about cooperative purchasing programs that could make it accessible, and the labor savings alone makes it worth considering. As Nathan watched his father engage with the visiting farmers, something shifted in his understanding of what was happening. Yes, there was a commercial aspect to Wright's initiative, and yes, their story was being packaged and presented for public consumption. But real change was also occurring, not just on their farm, but potentially throughout rural America. That evening, a community potluck was organized at the local church, bringing together the visiting farmers, the film crew, the Millers, the Thompsons, and many local families. As dishes were passed and conversation flowed, Nathan found himself drawn into a discussion with Frank Thompson, who was now able to move short distances with a walker. "Sarah told me about Wright's job offer," Frank said, his speech clearer than it had been during their first filmed interview. "Quite an opportunity." Nathan nodded. "I'm still trying to decide. The work sounds meaningful, but leaving the farm—" "Can I offer some unsolicited advice?" Frank asked, leaning forward. "Having faced mortality pretty directly with this stroke, I've gained some perspective. Life is too short to make decisions based primarily on obligation or fear of change. The question isn't whether you'd be letting your family down by leaving. It's whether you'd be letting yourself down by staying for the wrong reasons." The wisdom in Frank's words resonated deeply. Nathan had been framing his decision as a choice between selfishness and duty, but perhaps that was the wrong paradigm entirely. Perhaps the real question was about where he could make the most meaningful contribution. As the evening drew to a close, Alexander Wright asked for everyone's attention. "I have some exciting news to share," he announced. "Based on the success we're seeing here, Wright Enterprises has decided to expand the Heartland Initiative to 10 additional farming communities next year." Applause rippled through the gathering, followed by eager questions from the visiting farmers. Wright fielded them skillfully, outlining a vision for rural revitalization that extended far beyond their small community. "Of course, to expand effectively, we'll need the right leadership," Wright continued, his gaze finding Nathan in the crowd. "Someone who understands farming from the inside, who embodies the values this initiative represents, and who has demonstrated both practical wisdom and moral courage." Nathan felt the weight of expectations settling on his shoulders. In that moment, surrounded by neighbors, newcomers, and cameras documenting it all, he recognized that his decision about the job offer had implications beyond his personal future or even his family's farm. He had somehow, without intending to, become a symbol and potential catalyst for broader change. As the gathering dispersed into the cool evening air, Nathan hung back, helping to clean up while his mind worked through the implications of Wright's expanded vision. The Thompson children played tag between the church pews, their laughter echoing in the emptying building, a potent reminder of why he had given Bella away in the first place. "Your grandfather would be proud," Ellen said quietly, appearing beside him with a stack of folded tablecloths. "He always said you had a bigger heart than was strictly practical for a farmer." Nathan smiled at the memory. "I miss his advice right about now." Ellen studied her son's face. "He'd tell you to follow your conscience, even when it leads you away from the expected path." She touched his cheek gently. "And so would I." The Miller farm awoke to an unexpected flurry of activity the following morning. 3 sleek black SUVs pulled up the dirt driveway just after sunrise, disgorging a collection of suits and clipboards, Wright Enterprises executives coming to assess the Heartland Initiative's progress firsthand. Among them was a slender woman with silver-streaked hair, whose commanding presence caused an immediate stir among the film crew. "That's Catherine Vaughn," Vanessa whispered to Nathan as they watched from the porch. "Wright's board chair and major investor. She rarely leaves the corporate headquarters." Nathan observed the woman's purposeful stride as she surveyed the property, her analytical gaze missing nothing. Unlike Alexander Wright's warm charisma, Catherine Vaughn radiated cool efficiency, someone who evaluated projects strictly by their metrics and potential returns. "Not exactly a farm person, is she?" Nathan murmured, noting her impractical footwear sinking slightly into the soft earth. Vanessa shook her head. "Definitely not. But she controls the purse strings for the entire initiative. If she's here, it means this project has garnered serious attention at the highest levels." Throughout the morning, the executives toured the farm, inspecting equipment, reviewing data from the new systems, and observing the filming process. Thomas, now comfortable with his role as the initiative's agricultural expert, guided them through the technological innovations with surprising ease. Nathan marveled at his father's transformation. The same man who had once dismissed computers as useless complications was now fluently discussing data-driven farming methods with corporate executives. After lunch, Nathan found himself summoned to a private meeting with Wright and Vaughn in the temporary office set up in their converted tool shed. As he entered, he felt immediately outclassed by their tailored business attire and practiced corporate demeanors. "Nathan, thank you for joining us," Wright said warmly, gesturing to a chair. "Ms. Vaughn has been reviewing the initiative's progress and is particularly interested in your potential role moving forward." Catherine Vaughn studied Nathan with penetrating eyes. "Mr. Miller, Alexander tells me you're considering joining our rural outreach division. I'd like to hear your thoughts on how this initiative might scale nationally." Her directness caught Nathan off guard. "Well, I think what makes this project successful is its sensitivity to local conditions and values. Different farming communities face different challenges. You can't just apply a one-size-fits-all solution." Vaughn nodded, making a brief note on her tablet. "And how would you address that variability while maintaining programmatic coherence?" Nathan hesitated, acutely aware of his lack of formal business education. But then he remembered Frank Thompson's words about making decisions based on where he could contribute most meaningfully, not where he felt most comfortable. "I'd build regional advisory councils of actual farmers," he said with growing confidence. "People who understand the specific challenges of their areas. Keep the technology and financial support consistent, but tailor the implementation based on local input." For the next hour, Vaughn pressed him with increasingly complex questions about agricultural economics, community dynamics, and scaling challenges. Nathan answered honestly, admitting when he didn't know something but offering practical insights drawn from his lifelong experience in farming communities. When the interrogation finally ended, Wright escorted him outside, looking pleased. "You handled that remarkably well. Catherine doesn't suffer fools, and she seemed genuinely impressed." "I felt like I was taking an exam I hadn't studied for," Nathan admitted. Wright laughed. "In a way, you were, but your authentic understanding of rural issues came through clearly." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "She's approved the expansion of the Heartland Initiative, Nathan. 10 new communities next year, with potential for 50 the year after that. We're prepared to offer you a significant role in shaping that expansion. A 5-year contract with substantial compensation and resources to build the program according to your vision." The concrete offer hung in the air between them, no longer theoretical, but a tangible future path. Nathan felt the weight of the decision pressing on him more heavily than ever. "I need to discuss this with my family," he said finally. Wright nodded. "Of course. But we'll need your answer soon. The documentary wraps filming here next week, and we'll begin selecting the next communities for implementation immediately after." As Wright returned to the executives, Nathan wandered toward the eastern pasture where Duchess was grazing peacefully. The Holstein raised her head as he approached, her calm eyes seeming to offer silent wisdom. "What would you do?" Nathan asked the cow wryly. "Stay with the familiar or leap into the unknown?" Duchess merely returned to her grazing, untroubled by such human dilemmas. That evening, as golden hour bathed the farm in warm light, Vanessa's film crew captured what she called establishing shots. Beautiful panoramic views of the property that would provide context in the final documentary. Nathan sat on the porch watching them work, struck by how they transformed the ordinary landscape he'd known all his life into something almost mythic through their careful framing and timing. His father joined him, 2 glasses of lemonade in hand. "Your mother says you've been unusually quiet today." Nathan accepted the glass gratefully. Wright made the job offer official. 5-year contract, leading the expansion of the Heartland Initiative. He took a sip of the tart liquid, letting the familiar taste ground him. "It's a real opportunity to help a lot of farming families." Thomas nodded slowly. "But you're still torn. How did you know you wanted to be a farmer, Dad? Was there ever a moment when you considered doing something else?" Thomas settled into the rocking chair, considering the question. "There was. After high school, I had a scholarship offer to study engineering at the state university. My father, your grandfather, encouraged me to take it." This revelation surprised Nathan. He'd always assumed his father had never wanted anything beyond the farming life. "Why didn't you go?" "I almost did," Thomas admitted. "But that summer, there was a drought. Your grandfather broke his leg and the farm was struggling. I stayed to help, just temporarily, I thought." He smiled faintly at the memory. "Then I met your mother at the county fair, and somehow temporary became permanent. Do you regret it? Not taking the scholarship?" Thomas rocked gently, watching the film crew pack up their equipment as dusk approached. "I used to sometimes. During the hardest years, I'd wonder what life might have been like following a different path. But regret's a useless emotion, Nathan. You make your choices and you live with them, finding purpose where you can." He turned to face his son directly. "What I regret is not the choice I made, but how I sometimes resented the circumstances that limited my options. That resentment made me rigid, afraid of change, determined to control what little I could." He gestured toward the farm with its new equipment and systems. "I never let myself imagine alternatives, possibilities beyond mere survival." Nathan absorbed his father's words, seeing him with new clarity, not just as the unyielding figure of his childhood, but as a complex man shaped by his own sacrifices and compromises. "The difference," Thomas continued, "is that you aren't choosing between obligation and opportunity. Both paths before you have purpose and meaning. The farm will endure whether you stay or go. These new systems ensure that. Your mother and I can manage, especially with the support Wright's program provides." "But this farm has been in our family for generations," Nathan protested. "If I leave, I'm breaking that tradition." Thomas shook his head firmly. "Traditions evolve, son. They have to, or they die. Maybe your contribution to our family's legacy isn't tilling this particular soil, but helping ensure that family farms across the country can survive into the next generation." As darkness settled over the land, father and son sat in companionable silence, the weight of the decision between them, but no longer a source of division. For the first time since giving Bella away, Nathan felt a sense of clarity beginning to emerge, not about what choice he would make, but about the values that would guide that choice. Inside the house, the phone rang. Ellen answered it, then called from the doorway, "Nathan, it's Sarah Thompson. She says it's important." Nathan rose, puzzled by the late call. "I'll be right there." His father remained on the porch, silhouetted against the last light of day, a solitary figure contemplating his own journey of change and acceptance. Nathan hurried inside and took the phone, hearing immediate distress in Sarah Thompson's voice. "Nathan, I'm sorry to call so late, but I didn't know who else to turn to. It's Frank. He collapsed about an hour ago. The ambulance just took him to County General." "What happened?" Nathan asked, already reaching for his truck keys. "The doctors aren't sure. They think it might be another stroke. He was doing so well with his rehabilitation, and then suddenly—" Her voice broke. "The children are frightened, and I need to get to the hospital, but our car is in the shop, and I can't afford a taxi all the way to—" "I'll be there in 15 minutes, Nathan interrupted, already heading for the door. Ellen and Thomas had appeared in the hallway, concern etched on their faces. Nathan quickly explained the situation. "Go," Thomas said immediately. "We'll handle things here." The drive to the Thompson farm seemed interminable, though in reality it took less than the promised 15 minutes. When Nathan pulled up, he found Sarah waiting on the porch, her face pale but composed for the sake of the 3 children huddled around her. "I've called my sister to watch the kids, but she won't be here for another hour," Sarah explained as Nathan approached. "I can't wait that long to get to the hospital." Nathan made a quick decision. "I'll stay with the children until your sister arrives. You take my truck and go be with Frank." Relief washed over Sarah's face. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely, your place is with Frank right now." After brief instructions about bedtimes and emergency contacts, Sarah hurried to Nathan's truck. Before driving away, she rolled down the window. "Nathan, thank you. Not just for tonight, but for everything. I don't know what our family would have done without yours these past weeks." As the taillights of his truck disappeared down the dark country road, Nathan found himself shepherding the 3 Thompson children back inside. Amy, the youngest at 6, clung to his hand. "Is Daddy going to die?" she asked, her small voice trembling. The directness of the question caught Nathan off guard. "The doctors are going to do everything they can to help him," he said carefully. "Your mom is on her way to be with him right now." "Because of the magic cow you gave us?" Amy persisted, her child's logic making connections adults might miss. Nathan knelt to meet her at eye level. "What do you mean, sweetie?" "Mommy said Bella was like a miracle. She made everything better. Maybe she can make Daddy better, too." The innocent faith in her voice squeezed Nathan's heart. "Your dad is getting the best care possible," he assured her, unwilling to either confirm or deny the possibility of bovine-assisted miracles. For the next 2 hours, Nathan distracted the children with board games and stories, all while his mind raced with concern for Frank. The oldest Thompson child, 12-year-old Michael, eventually fell asleep on the couch. 10-year-old Emma helped Nathan get Amy settled in bed before retreating to her own room, worry evident in her eyes despite Nathan's reassurances. When Sarah's sister finally arrived, Nathan briefed her on the situation and promised to check in the following day. With no vehicle of his own, he began the long walk back to his family's farm in the moonlit darkness. The solitary journey gave him unexpected space for reflection. The crisis with Frank had temporarily pushed the job decision from his mind, but now it returned with new context. The Thompson situation highlighted the precarious nature of rural life, how quickly circumstances could change, how vital community support became in moments of crisis. If he took Wright's offer, he would be working to strengthen such support systems across the country, but he would also be distancing himself from the direct, personal connections that made those systems meaningful in the first place. By the time Nathan reached home, the house was dark, except for the porch light. A note from his mother explained that they had gone to bed, but left a plate of dinner for him in the refrigerator. Exhausted yet restless, Nathan warmed the food and sat at the kitchen table, where months of concerns, family disagreements, and life-changing decisions had played out. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Frank stabilized. Doctors say not another stroke, exhaustion and dehydration. Keeping him overnight for observation. Thank you for everything." Relief flooded through him. As he texted back his well wishes, Nathan noticed the time, nearly 1 a.m. Despite the late hour, he found himself calling Alexander Wright's number. Wright answered on the third ring, sounding surprisingly alert. "Nathan, is everything all right?" "Sorry to call so late," Nathan began, then explained the situation with Frank Thompson. "I'm concerned about the pressure the documentary and initiative are putting on him. The doctors say it's exhaustion and dehydration." There was a pause before Wright responded. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. We certainly don't want the program to negatively impact anyone's health." Another pause. "Would you like us to scale back the Thompson family's involvement?" The question caught Nathan off guard. He had expected defensive justifications or corporate platitudes, not a direct acknowledgement of concern, an offer to adjust. "Maybe during Frank's recovery period," Nathan suggested. "And maybe there's a way Wright Enterprises could help with the medical bills, something outside the formal initiative." "Consider it done," Wright replied without hesitation. "I'll have my assistant arrange it first thing tomorrow." "And Nathan, your concern for the Thompsons speaks volumes about why you're the right person for this position." After the call ended, Nathan sat motionless at the kitchen table, a new understanding crystallizing in his mind. The Heartland Initiative wasn't perfect. It blended corporate interests with genuine desire for positive change, packaging rural struggles into neat narratives while simultaneously addressing real needs. But perhaps that complexity was precisely why someone like him needed to be involved. Someone who understood both the value of the help being offered and the importance of how that help was implemented. Morning brought news that Frank would be released from the hospital. The filming schedule was immediately adjusted, with Vanessa agreeing to focus exclusively on the Miller farm for the next week to give the Thompsons space for recovery. Nathan visited Frank that afternoon, finding him propped up in bed at home, looking weakened but in good spirits. "The doctors say I've been pushing too hard," Frank admitted ruefully. "Trying to prove I could still be the man of the house despite everything." "You have nothing to prove," Nathan assured him. "You're already the cornerstone of this family." Frank studied Nathan with perceptive eyes. "You've made your decision about the job, haven't you?" Nathan nodded slowly. "I think so. Just need to talk it through with my parents." "They'll understand," Frank said confidently. "Thomas has changed these past weeks. Opened up in ways I wouldn't have thought possible. He sees your worth, Nathan, even if that means watching you follow a different path than his." That evening, as the documentary crew packed up after a day of filming the new crop irrigation systems, Nathan found a moment alone with his father in the barn. The familiar sense of hay and livestock created a fitting backdrop for what he needed to say. "Dad," Nathan began carefully, "I've been thinking about Wright's offer." Thomas nodded, continuing to brush Duchess with methodical strokes. "And I think I need to take it. Not because I want to leave the farm, but because I believe I can help create something important, something that might make a difference for families like the Thompsons across the country." Thomas's hands stilled momentarily, then resumed their rhythmic motion. "I know," he said simply. "You know? You're my son, Nathan. I may not always understand your decisions, but I do know your heart." Thomas set the brush aside and turned to face him directly. "When you gave Bella away, I was angry because I saw it as reckless, impulsive. I couldn't see past our own struggles to recognize the greater good you were serving." He placed his weathered hands on Nathan's shoulders. "But I was wrong. That decision, as difficult as it was for our family in the moment, set in motion changes none of us could have imagined. It brought help, not just to the Thompsons, but to us as well. It revealed a capacity for visionary thinking I didn't know you possessed." Nathan felt a weight lifting from his chest. "So you're okay with me leaving?" "I'm proud of you for choosing a path with purpose," Thomas corrected gently. "This farm will always be your home, Nathan. But your work, your contribution to the world, That may lie elsewhere. And that's as it should be. As they walked back toward the house together, the setting sun cast long shadows across the land that had been in their family for generations. Nathan realized that in giving away Bella, he had not only changed the Thompsons' future, but had inadvertently altered his own, opening doors he never knew existed and revealing strengths within himself and his father that might otherwise have remained dormant. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them knowing that sometimes the most valuable gift was not what you received, but what you found the courage to give away. The final week of filming brought a bittersweet atmosphere to the Miller farm. The documentary crew, once viewed as intrusive strangers, had become familiar fixtures, their departure marking another shift in the rapidly changing landscape of Nathan's life. Vanessa conducted what she called wrap interviews, capturing the family's reflections on the transformation they had experienced over the past month. Looking back, she asked Thomas as they sat in the newly renovated barn, "How do you feel about Nathan's decision to give Bella away now that you've seen the consequences unfold?" Thomas adjusted his cap thoughtfully. "I believe we go through life with certain fixed ideas about what's right, what's necessary. Nathan challenged those ideas. At first, I could only see what we were losing. Our best cow, our security. I couldn't see what might be gained." He gestured around at the gleaming equipment and healthy livestock. "But sometimes you need to let go of something valuable to make room for something even more valuable." "And that applies to Nathan's upcoming departure as well?" Vanessa prompted gently. A shadow of sadness crossed Thomas's face, quickly replaced by resolute pride. "My son has gifts that shouldn't be limited to this one farm. His understanding of rural communities, his compassion, those things can help a lot of families like ours. As a father, I couldn't ask for anything more meaningful than that." Ellen's interview touched on similar themes of adaptation and growth, but with her characteristic warmth and practicality. "Farming families have always sent their children out into the world," she observed. "In the old days, there wasn't enough land to divide among all the children, so some would become teachers or preachers or move west to start their own farms. Nathan's journey is different in its details, but similar in essence, taking what he's learned here and applying it in a broader context." When Nathan's turn came, Vanessa asked him directly about his decision to accept the position with Wright Enterprises. "I never planned for any of this," Nathan admitted, looking out over the fields where he had worked alongside his father since childhood. "When I gave Bella to the Thompsons, I was just trying to help a neighbor in need. I didn't foresee the documentary, or the initiative, or this job opportunity." "Do you have any regrets?" Vanessa asked. Nathan considered the question carefully. "I regret the strain it initially caused in my relationship with my father. But no, I don't regret giving Bella away. That decision revealed possibilities I couldn't have imagined, not just for me, but for both our families and potentially for farming communities across the country." As the film crew captured their final footage of the farm, Alexander Wright arrived with contracts for Nathan's new position and detailed plans for the transition. "We'll start with a 2-week orientation at headquarters," Wright explained as they reviewed the paperwork in the kitchen. "Then you'll help select the next 10 communities for the Heartland Initiative. By January, you'll be heading up the entire Rural Outreach Division." Ellen, serving coffee as they talked, couldn't hide the mixture of pride and wistfulness in her expression. Her son would soon be navigating corporate boardrooms instead of cornfields, his hands holding pens and tablets rather than pitchforks and feed buckets. "It's quite a change," she remarked, pouring Wright a refill. "A necessary one," Wright replied. "The challenges facing rural America require fresh perspectives from people who truly understand the communities we're trying to serve. Nathan brings an authenticity that can't be taught in business school." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Sarah Thompson stood on the porch, a freshly baked pie in her hands. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, entering at Ellen's warm invitation. I just wanted to bring something to say thank you. Frank's doing much better. The doctors say his recovery is back on track." "That's wonderful news," Ellen exclaimed, making room at the table. "How are the children adjusting to all the changes?" As Sarah joined their conversation, Nathan was struck by how the boundaries between the two families had softened over the past month. What had begun as a simple act of charity, the giving of a cow, had evolved into something more profound, a genuine interweaving of lives and futures. Wright Enterprises had just announced a special educational fund for the Thompson children, ensuring they could attend college, despite Frank's medical expenses. Meanwhile, Ellen had been teaching Sarah her grandmother's techniques for preserving vegetables from their newly productive garden. Later that afternoon, Nathan visited the Thompson farm one last time before his departure. Frank was sitting in a rocking chair on the porch, watching his children play with the farm's newest addition, a calf born to Bella just 2 days earlier. "They named her Hope," Frank said as Nathan joined him. "Seemed fitting, considering everything her mother represented for our family." Nathan smiled, observing little Amy carefully stroking the calf's soft nose. "It's a good name." Frank's health challenges had softened his appearance, but his eyes remained sharp and perceptive. "So you're off to the corporate world next week. Quite a journey from giving away a cow to helping shape agricultural policy." "Sometimes I still can't believe it," Nathan admitted. "I'm not sure I'm qualified for this responsibility." "That concern is precisely what qualifies you," Frank replied. "The people who worry about their adequacy for power are usually the ones who wield it most wisely." He gestured toward the fields where the new irrigation system was already showing remarkable results. "Both our farms are producing better than they have in years. The technology works, but it never would have reached us without your act of generosity creating the connection." He fixed Nathan with a meaningful look. "That's what you'll be doing in your new role, creating connections between resources and needs, between corporate capabilities and rural realities. Don't underestimate how important that bridge building can be." The evening before Nathan's departure, a surprise gathering materialized at the Miller farm. Neighbors, community members, and the entire Thompson family arrived bearing potluck dishes and heartfelt wishes. The documentary crew, scheduled to leave the following day, captured the impromptu celebration with minimal intrusion, sensing the authentic moment unfolding. Ed Johnson, who had organized the town's original collection to replace Bella, presented Nathan with a handcrafted wooden plaque inscribed with a simple message: "For reminding us what community means." As darkness fell, lanterns were lit around the yard, casting warm pools of light over the assembled friends and neighbors. Someone produced a fiddle, another a guitar, and soon traditional country melodies filled the air. Nathan found himself pulled into conversations with people he'd known all his life, but was seeing in a new light, each one expressing support for his new path while reminiscing about shared memories of his years on the farm. In a quiet moment, Nathan slipped away to the barn, needing a brief respite from the emotional intensity of the evening. He found his father already there, checking on Duchess one final time before bed. "Quite a send-off," Thomas observed, leaning against the stall door. Nathan nodded, words temporarily beyond him. "You know," Thomas continued, his voice taking on a reflective quality, "when my father ran this farm, he had a saying, 'The land doesn't belong to us. We belong to the land.' I always thought it meant we were tied to this place, bound by obligation to keep working it as he had, as his father had before him." He moved to stand beside Nathan, both men looking out the barn door toward the gathering of friends illuminated by lantern light. "But I think I misunderstood. What he meant was that we're part of something larger than ourselves, not just the physical land, but the community it supports, the traditions it carries, the future it represents." Thomas placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "You'll be serving that same purpose, Nathan, just in a different way. And that makes me prouder than I can say." The simple honesty in his father's words moved Nathan deeply. The distance that had opened between them after giving Bella away had not merely closed. It had transformed into something stronger, more resilient, built on mutual respect rather than unspoken expectations. As they rejoined the celebration, Nathan caught sight of Sarah and Frank Thompson dancing slowly despite Frank's cane, their children watching with delight. Nearby, his mother laughed with neighbors who had supported them through years of hardship. The Wright Enterprises team mingled easily with the local farmers, worlds converging in unlikely harmony. All of it, the entire unlikely tapestry of connection and possibility, had sprung from a single decision made in the pre-dawn hours of what had seemed an ordinary day. Nathan had simply led a cow down a dusty road, never imagining how that humble act would ripple outward, transforming not only his life, but countless others. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the corporate headquarters, unfamiliar responsibilities, and the daunting task of translating his rural understanding into effective programs. But tonight, surrounded by the community that had shaped him, Nathan felt ready for whatever lay ahead. 6 months later, Nathan stood at the window of his 32nd floor office, gazing out at the Chicago skyline. The panoramic view of gleaming skyscrapers and Lake Michigan's vast blue expanse still felt surreal to someone who had spent his entire life with horizons defined by cornfields and open pastures. The transition from farmer to corporate executive had been both more challenging and more rewarding than he had anticipated. His office bore small reminders of home, a framed photograph of the Miller farm at sunrise, a polished piece of wood from their old barn door, a small jar of soil from the eastern field where Bella had grazed. These touchstones grounded him amid the whirlwind of his new responsibilities. A knock at the door interrupted his moment of reflection. Catherine Vaughn entered, her silver-streaked hair now a familiar sight in strategy meetings and board presentations. "The documentary premieres tonight," she remarked, setting a folder on his desk. "Nervous?" Nathan smiled ruefully. "A little. It's strange to think of our private family story being broadcast nationally." "The advance reviews are outstanding," Vaughn assured him. "Critics are calling it a heartfelt exploration of rural values in modern America, and a template for ethical corporate engagement with struggling communities." "And the expansion numbers?" Nathan asked, turning to more familiar territory. Vaughn's normally reserved expression softened with satisfaction. "Exceeding projections, 32 farming communities now participating, with quantifiable improvements in crop yields, resource efficiency, and economic stability." She tapped the folder she had brought. "Your regional advisory council model is proving particularly effective. The local input has prevented numerous potential implementation problems." Nathan nodded, not surprised. During his first weeks at Wright Enterprises, he had insisted on building a framework that respected the expertise of local farmers, rather than imposing solutions from above. It had meant countless hours of additional work, recruiting council members and establishing feedback mechanisms, but the results validated his approach. "And the Thompson farm?" he asked, the question he always saved for last in these updates. "Thriving," Vaughn replied, knowing the importance of this particular data point. "Frank's health continues to improve. Their crop yields are up 47% from last year. The Children's Education Fund is fully established. And," she added with the hint of a smile, "Bella has produced another calf, a male this time." After Vaughn departed, Nathan returned to the window, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The learning curve had been steep. Corporate politics, budgetary processes, legal considerations, all entirely foreign to his farming background. Yet his authentic understanding of rural challenges had proven invaluable, earning him respect from colleagues and community partners alike. Most importantly, the Heartland Initiative was making a real difference. His monthly video calls with participating families across the country confirmed what the data suggested. Though not without challenges, The program was helping stem the tide of family farm foreclosures while introducing sustainable practices that would benefit future generations. That evening, Nathan attended the documentary premiere at a downtown theater, accompanied by Alexander Wright and the entire production team. Seeing Vanessa Chen in an elegant evening gown, rather than her usual practical field attire, momentarily disoriented him. "You clean up pretty well yourself, farm boy," she teased, noting his tailored suit. As the lights dimmed and the film began, Nathan felt a curious sense of displacement, watching his family's story unfold on the big screen. There was his father, initially resistant to Nathan's gift of Bella, gradually opening to new possibilities. There was Sarah Thompson, her voice breaking with emotion as she described what the cow had meant to her struggling family. And there was Nathan himself, earnestly explaining his decision in what now seemed like another lifetime. The documentary skillfully wove together the personal narrative with broader themes of rural resilience, technological adaptation, and community interdependence. Though Nathan had reviewed early cuts during post-production, seeing the completed film with an audience brought new perspective. The collective gasps, chuckles, and occasional sniffles around him confirmed that their story had resonated beyond the confines of their small farming community. When the credits rolled and the lights came up, the audience rose in sustained applause. Alexander Wright stepped onto the stage, inviting Nathan to join him. Together they fielded questions about the initiative's progress and future plans, Nathan's straightforward, authentic responses balancing Wright's polished corporate messaging. Afterward, at the reception, Wright raised a glass in a private toast. "To giving away cows and changing lives," he said with a warm smile, "including your own." Nathan returned home the following weekend, his first visit since the Christmas holidays. As the company car turned onto the familiar dirt road, his pulse quickened with anticipation. The farm came into view, looking both exactly the same and subtly different. New equipment gleamed in the fields, and the barn sported a fresh coat of red paint, but the essential character of the place remained unchanged. His mother spotted him first, dropping her gardening tools to rush across the yard. His father emerged from the barn more slowly, but with equal warmth in his greeting. Though they spoke by phone weekly, the physical reunion carried special significance, a reaffirmation of bonds that had not only survived their reconfiguration, but had grown stronger through it. Over dinner in the kitchen, where so many life-changing conversations had taken place, Nathan shared stories of his corporate adventures, while his parents updated him on local happenings. Thomas had taken on 2 apprentices from the university's agricultural program, passing along generations of farming wisdom while simultaneously embracing the innovative methods introduced by the Heartland Initiative. The old and the new, working together, he explained, a perspective that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. These young people understand the technology, but they need to learn the intangibles, reading the sky, knowing the soil, respecting the rhythms of the land. Ellen mentioned that Frank Thompson was now well enough to help coach his son's baseball team, and Sarah had started a small business selling artisanal cheeses made from Bella's exceptional milk. "They're coming for lunch tomorrow," she added. "The children are so excited to see you. Amy asks about you constantly. She thinks you're famous now that she's seen you on television." After dinner, Nathan walked the boundaries of the farm alone, reconnecting with the land that had shaped him. The evening light cast long shadows across the fields, creating a tapestry of gold and green that no city skyline could match. In the eastern pasture, Duchess grazed contentedly, raising her head briefly to acknowledge his presence. The distant sound of a helicopter drew his attention skyward. For a moment, he was transported back to that morning when Alexander Wright's arrival had set in motion changes none of them could have foreseen. The simple act of giving away their prized cow had initiated a cascade of consequences, expanding outward like ripples in a pond, touching first the Thompsons, then their community, and now farming families across the nation. As the helicopter disappeared over the horizon, Nathan found himself at the spot where he had first led Bella down the road toward the Thompson farm. The memory was crystal clear. The uncertainty, the conviction that he was doing the right thing despite the consequences, the weight of responsibility for a decision made without his father's blessing. The rattle of an approaching vehicle interrupted his reverie. Thomas pulled up in the farm truck, rolling down the window. "Thought I might find you out here," he said. "Feel like a drive?" Nathan climbed in beside his father, curious but comfortable in the familiar silence that settled between them. Thomas drove them beyond the farm's boundaries to a hilltop overlooking the valley. From this vantage point, they could see not only the Miller property, but the Thompson farm as well, along with several others participating in the Heartland Initiative. "I come up here sometimes," Thomas admitted, shutting off the engine. "To get perspective, to see the bigger picture." The setting sun painted the valley in warm hues. The fields arranged in geometric patterns that stretched to the horizon. Solar panels glinted on barn roofs. New irrigation systems traced efficient paths through crops. And in the distance, a group of farmers gathered around a shared piece of equipment, the cooperative approach that Nathan had championed for smaller operations. "You've changed things, son," Thomas said quietly. "Not just for our family, but for all of them." He gestured toward the vista spread before them. "Your grandfather would be proud, not because you stayed, but because you understood what the land and the community truly needed from you." As darkness began to settle over the valley, father and son sat in contemplative silence, bearing witness to the transformation below. Fields and families, traditions and innovations, past and future woven together in harmonious possibility. Nathan's decision to give away Bella had seemed impulsive, even reckless in the moment. Yet from that single act of generosity had flowed consequences no one could have predicted. Renewed farms, healed relationships, expanded horizons, and opportunities that crossed boundaries of geography and generation. Some gifts, it seemed, continued giving long after the initial sacrifice, their value multiplying in ways that transcended mere economics. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Nathan understood with perfect clarity that in giving away what his family had treasured most, he had discovered something even more precious: his true purpose.